Our school turns 100 years old this year.
We wanted to know what it was like back in the day here at Scammon.
So we examined artifacts, photographs, and archives about Jonathan Scammon Elementary School.
We became archivists and historians, asking questions about the past and looking for answers.
The archives were super interesting, but they couldn't tell the whole story.
So we interviewed people from different decades, and they shared all kinds of memories with us.
When we put together the archives and the oral history, they formed a story.
This story.
So my name's Dan Pogzelski. I was the co-author of several history books, including Avondale, Chicago's Polish Village. I've been involved with the Northwest Chicago Historical Society, and very proudly an alumnus, but only for kindergarten, of Scammon Elementary. Well, maybe I'll start with the patron of the school, right? Jonathan Scammon. He's a really interesting figure that really links together so many different aspects of Chicago. He arrives here from Maine. Chicago still has not yet at that time become officially a city. It's 1835. Right? So Chicago was already a municipality, but it was not officially a city yet. He's part of this wave of Yankees, right? A transitional figure from earlier Chicago had been a city, a municipality that was very strongly indigenous as well as French, right? The Métis really dominated. Someone who becomes incredibly entrepreneurial, a friend of Abraham Lincoln. We're the land of Lincoln. This guy is friends with him, a fellow lawyer. So buddies with one of our prized Illinoisans, right? And you have where someone who was very much in such high regard that numerous times folks actually asked him to run for office. He only agreed 3 times. One of those times, interestingly enough, he was actually alderman of the 1st ward. Now, at that time you had where the city of Chicago had 2 aldermen per ward. The ward that he was the alderman of was the 1st ward. Later in the 1940s, the 1st ward was actually known as the most wealthy ward in the world, right? When they were talking about, because it represented the central city at that time. Someone who was staunchly anti-slavery, something that was ripping that party apart at the time because you had sort of waffling on the issue of slavery. Some Whigs wanted to sidestep the issue, whereas others, represented by Jonathan Scammon, were vehemently opposed to it. One of the ways that his life could have potentially intersected with this one is his involvement in the Underground Railroad. Now, of course, he never admitted it. But I think it's important to remember that here in this neighborhood, actually in this vicinity, you had just north of here for many years in the neighborhood of Old Irving Park, you've had rumors that went around how there were homes, lovely Victorian homes, genteel houses, and so it's possible, I'm not saying that this did happen, it is possible Jonathan Scammon actually came to this area with his involvement in the Underground Railroad, since you did have Underground Railroad activity here, but you had that in many places. Today, we think of Chicago and the dynamic rebound that the Great Chicago Fire was something that created an opportunity, and it certainly did. However, Jonathan Scammon did not fare well. In fact, when he died in 1890, and he was like 77, I think, at the time, he actually said something along the lines that, he didn't know if he could find like a $5 bill that was his own. But it's very appropriate that this school is named after him because he was the first president of the Chicago School Board, and he was someone who was very involved in education. You actually have where he funded and named for his wife the famous Dearborn Observatory. You might be like, why Dearborn? Because his better half, to honor her and her legacy. He himself was a Swedenborgian, very involved with that church, and the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg were something that were very dear to him, and you could see that he tried to embody those values in his life. In so many ways, his life intersects with the grand narrative of Chicago in so many ways. When this school was built in 1926, that was sort of the end of an era for this vicinity right here. So earlier it had been genteel, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, but with the great transatlantic migration that you had here. So from across the Atlantic, of folks that came predominantly from Eastern Europe that settled here in this area, you had that transition happened, the end of that transition happened as this school was being built, right? So at both ends of his life, you had where even in the school that bears his legacy, continued that seminal connection to different changes in the history of Chicago. I went to school here. I lived with my parents as a young child in a 2-flat. And I guess that would connect with how this area, it's changed with regards to ethnicity over the years, but still has continued in terms of class. Still overwhelmingly immigrant. You might have had folks that were Polish when I was growing up here. Today, from many different areas and countries in Latin America and beyond. And it goes to show you how here in this vicinity, whether it's the connection to the Underground Railroad, whether it's in how the bungalow belts, right? 2-flats, which have always been this area where people from whatever country you may be were able to find and create home, that this was an oasis. This was a place where people really were able to buy into the American dream. You have where many of these important thoroughfares of Chicago, Belmont Avenue, with the many industrial buildings, right? Today, they're very much in demand, lofts, right? So you see the Florsheim building, the former DeVry College. Back then, this was where people worked, right? Chicago, the city of broad shoulders. This neighborhood, this vicinity, was very, very different from the time it looked when Jonathan Young Scammon passed away. Now, he wasn't connected to this neighborhood only through the school, right? But it's an interesting connection how that old WASP Chicago had very much transformed when you saw these huge factories, right? And the people that came here, it was at the time a great luxury to be able to walk to work, right? And so folks will remark about this vicinity and they say, oh, it's full of smokestacks and steeples, right? The remarkable architecture here in this area is not in contrast it with the boulevard on Logan Square, right? Where you'll see these gray stones and really beautiful residential architecture. It has a beauty to it, but it's a more modest beauty. You'll see the symmetry of 2-flats and the brickwork, but the buildings that first catch your eye are all too often the stately steeples of the different churches and the smokestacks, right, that provided jobs for people to be able to afford this neighborhood. When folks would ask me, like, well, you know, you grew up very Polish, Chicago. Yes, I went to Polish Scouts, went to Polish delis, went to the Polish church and all these activities. But you know what? We would go to the local pupuseria. We would go to get a gyros. It was a very cosmopolitan and multi-ethnic background. I think that's something that you still have in this neighborhood, and it's part of the wealth, is that Chicago's a place where you could travel the world in 80 blocks, and this neighborhood definitely fits the bill.
My family moved into the house on the corner of Keeler and Henderson in 1959, the fall of 1959. I started coming to Scammon in, what year did I say, 1964. 64, 65, 66, 67. I graduated class of 67. It was so great that we lived across the street because my parents came over from Europe after the war, the Second World War. So none of us had any idea how the schools in the United States, Illinois, and Chicago operate. Thank God we lived across the street. I cannot tell you how many times we had no idea if there was school today or not because it might be a holiday. We looked out the window to see if there was anybody coming to school, if there was any activity, you know, teachers or somebody going in, and then we were ready to go in case we had to go. And, you know, in time we figured it out because my sister came to Scammon also. Now, the other thing, the school was quite a bit different back then. One of the big ways was that the original and the only, one and only at the time, DeVry Tech was on Belmont, just east of Keeler. The building is still there. Many of the houses in this neighborhood had converted basements and attics, including our house. The attic was converted into an apartment. But yeah, and so the whole neighborhood was filled with DeVry students. And this is the cream of the crop. I remember many of them went into the military, or they went into work for military contractors to make missiles and guidance systems. This was DeVry Tech. The neighborhood had several small gas stations back in the 60s. Karlov and Milwaukee, which is now a used car lot. One on Keeler in Milwaukee, which has been used as a parking lot for many years. Very small little corner thing next to the dance studio. And that used to be a gas station. Then on Milwaukee, a little bit north of Keeler, there was a place called Easy Go. Well, you're not talking premium gasoline, but it was cheap, and Easy Go. Keeler and Milwaukee on the northwest corner is now a auto body shop. That used to be a mobile gas station. But there were little gas stations all over the place, with maybe even 2 pumps or something. It was crazy, but they're all long gone, especially the one on the little corner lot on Keeler and Milwaukee. Plus, there were little stores all over Chicago, not just here. Little stores, corner stores, we used to call them. And there was one right here on Kildare and Henderson. There's, I think it's some kind of a yard is on the corner there, on the north west corner, and then next to that is a house. But if you look real carefully, you'll see it's like a converted house. There used to be a store there. We used to go there and buy soda. It was like 5 cents for a bottle of we used to buy grape soda. Oh my God, just soda. And then chips. We used to buy a bag of chips for 5 cents. Candy bar, 5 cents. We used to have patrol boys, which is kind of a stupid name because there are also girls doing that. And the patrol boys and girls would have, I believe they were orange belts that would go across your chest and around your waist, and we would get to go out of class. I was one for a while, not long, but for a while I made it somehow. You were special if you were a patrol boy, well, sort of. And I had the corner on Melrose and Keeler. After school, the kids would all go out in all directions, and the patrol boys and girls would stand there and put their arms out when cars were coming. Nobody that I remember in my years here, from K through 8, ever had their parents pick them up in a car. We all walked. Everybody lived in the neighborhood. No cars. There were no cars out in front picking up kids. Nothing. No buses, no cars, no nothing. And it was just one building. All these additions were added on later. And originally, there was a playground for the children on Keeler Avenue, right by the sidewalk, just north of School Street. There were several swings. There was swings first, then there was a monkey bars, the long thing where you, with all the rungs, you'd go from one rung to the other. And then there was a dome with all the tubes and stuff, so you could climb on the dome and hang from the inside, and all this was all open. The cars that the teachers may have had, first of all, there weren't all that many kids or teachers here. They all parked by the smokestack. There was a row or 2 of cars there, and that's it. All the rest of that was wide open playground. We had 2 recesses a day, a morning recess and an afternoon recess. We would all come out here and run around like crazy. Yeah, now they've made a parking lot there, and there was also, I pointed out, there was a tunnel underneath the smokestack, and they bricked that in a long time ago, which, hello, makes sense. And we used to crawl in there as kids. And then there were 2 openings where they redid Scammon, where they changed the windows. They bricked up some windows. There used to be a window above the door to the auditorium when you come in off of Henderson. If you look above the doors, you'll see it's been bricked in. There used to be windows there. And I remember we used to go up there in the balcony, and you could go and look out the window. We had no air conditioning back then. There was no air conditioning. We opened up the windows. That was all you had. So we survived. I don't know how, but plus there were 2 very bizarre empty indentations in the building, both in the back of the building, and you can see where they're bricked in. And they were deep. They went from the outside wall all the way in to where the corridor is, inside the school. And they were just empty spaces. We used to go in there and do nothing. There was nothing, but we went in there just to look around. Well, obviously, when they redid the building, they bricked it up. In the front of the building, it was all open. There was no fence, and there were no trees. It was all just grass. And it was a subtle slope, going up from the building, a little down, and then just to the sidewalk, not a single tree. We used to play touch football on that grass. My friends and I, we used to go on after school, play touch football. The other thing we used to do is crawl on the window ledges. On the outside of the building, if you look there, the ledge I believe is still there. I looked on the way over here again. There's a little ledge there. Well, the old windows somehow, you could grab on, you could climb up there, walked sideways across that ledge. This is what we did back then, especially the boys, so just screwing around. Oh, and then in the winter, we used it with a sleigh. I still have the sleigh in the garage from the 60s. It was not a big one, a little sleigh. And the kids, other people would have some kind of a sleigh. There were none of those plastic things back then. It was all sleighs with 2 metal rails, and you would lie down on it, and we would slide down that incline. This was all we had, but it was a lot of fun. They used to have, I think once a year, what's called the White Elephant Sale. This was fantastic. Oh my God. Kids made all kinds of crafts. I still remember braiding in plastic, these plastic braids where you could put around your neck and hang a whistle at the bottom. And then there were baked goods and baked goods and whatever. Just the whole gymnasium. This was in the gym. It was all full of tables, and we would all be selling things and buying things. And I don't remember all the details, but I remember these sales were absolutely fantastic. There were also quite a few businesses right in the neighborhood, at least 5, 6, 7, if not more, buildings where there used to be factories. There's one right down here on Roscoe. If you go down Roscoe by the alley, if you look, I think they made it into a garage, but if that used to be some kind of a small business, a workshop of some sort. If you go down Henderson to the first alley and look at the first building past the alley, you'll see there was even on Addison, there was some kind of a foundry. They made they poured iron. It's now a storage facility. I remember I used to drive by there and you'd see these furnaces, open through the open doors, big doors. If you drive around the neighborhood here, look on the corners. You'll see on a corner a residence, but if you look carefully, it's a converted storefront. And they had milk and stuff, and if you needed something, you didn't go run anywhere. A lot of people didn't have cars as many as we do now. Back then, a lot of people didn't, they had one car. We only had one car, and my dad was the only one driving. My mom didn't drive. So if you needed milk or something, well, we had milk delivered by Bowman Milk Company, I think. There used to be milk deliveries. There were these not very large trucks driving around the neighborhood, and I still have the metal box that they put the milk in. It's in the garage. I have it. They would come by and put the gallon of milk by the back door. And you would leave them $1, and they'd give you back a nickel. It was 95 cents, the last thing I remember. And I remember always trying to grab that nickel so I could go to the corner store over here on Kildare and buy some, candy or something. Then we also had eggs delivered at our house. The egg delivery guy from somewhere outside of Chicago, he had a chicken farm, and he would drive around. I still remember he had like a station wagon, what used to be called like a woody with wood paneling on the sides. Many homes here were heated by coal. Now what that required was delivery of coal. Many homes that had these coal-fired furnaces in the basement got coal delivered regularly. They're all over the neighborhood. Just look. Predominantly brick buildings. About ground level, you'll see a door, a metal door built into the wall. And the coal truck would come around. The trucks would come, and they'd put a chute, and then the coal would slide into the basement. And she'd have literally a pile of coal. I remember seeing that basement when I was a little kid. Some of the homes had oil, and those were oil trucks came around, the cylindrical oil trucks. And now we're talking in the 60s. These are older versions of trucks. The other thing we used to be able to do in the 60s, you could burn your leaves in the fall. This was huge. I remember the smell of leaves, and we used to do it too. You rake the leaves and put them in the gutter, and then you lit them up with a match. There would be smoke rising, and the smell actually was not bad. I remember once there was a huge excitement. All of a sudden, lots of action, people coming out, everything. It turns out, 2 guys, and I remember who they were back then. They were kind of like troublemakers. One of them was anyway. They got on the roof of the school. What turns out happening, they were playing football, and the football got on the roof. They got in the school. I think they climbed somehow into a window and made their way up to the roof. There were a lot of police out here, and they got them down. And I don't know what happened to them, but I'll never forget that day. Guys up on the roof, predominantly, I will say, Polish. Then there were Italians. There were some Irish, some German. Yeah, predominantly Europe. We had one fellow who I also mentioned who was Japanese. Wonderful fellow. Several of us from Lane, when we graduated in '67, we were accepted at Lane Tech. If you got accepted to Lane Tech, that was it. That was the cream of the crop in the high schools in Chicago. You had to claim what high school you were going to. Obviously, Schurz was the neighborhood school, so it was assumed and expected everybody would go to Schurz. However, you did have the ability to request somewhere else. Lane Tech at that time, you had to apply and they accepted you. You did not get in there automatically. And I remember like yesterday, you were so nervous because you had no idea if they'd take you. 2 counselors or people, students, I don't know who they sent, from Lane Tech came to Scammon to interview those who wanted to go to Lane Tech. We were interviewed in the library. Now, I don't know if the library is still where it was back in the 60s. The library was on the Henderson side, towards the gym. And then I remember getting the news I was accepted. There were, if I recall, 200 and something students here when I went here. I went from here, which was right across the street, okay? I walked across the street to school for 8 years, 9 years, kindergarten through 8. Now all of a sudden, I have to walk to Addison, take a bus to Lane. At the time when I was in there were over 5,000 boys. Lane Tech was the largest high school in the United States. Well, I'll have to admit I was kind of sad. It's no longer an auditorium. Well, maybe it is, but it's a lunchroom. It was all auditorium. There were single seats. There were rows of seats, just like the seats in the balcony. The whole main floor was seats like that. And we had our graduation there. We had all the graduations were in the auditorium. And the 8th grade teacher, Mrs. McCarthy, who was legendary, for many years she was here. She was a legend. She would make these productions for all the 8th grade graduates. What she did, she wrote all these scripts and songs and everything. It was a whole production for the graduates. We put on a whole show. And she did this every year. And for many years, I don't know how she did it. An amazing woman. She was so nice. Back then, by the way, in my time, we went home for lunch. Obviously, no more than an hour. It couldn't have been. But we went home for lunch. There was no lunchroom here. Yeah, the gymnasium. Mr. Goldberg was my last gym teacher. Mr. Goldberg, I still remember him very, very well. And I remember 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Zajac. I believe it was her name, Zajac. She was nice. And then, the kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Reese, Miss Reese. We had a nap time in kindergarten. We had to bring a large towel from home, rolled up. We brought a towel in. And every day from whatever time to whatever time, we took a nap on the floor, on our towels. Oh, and Mrs. Burgess, I don't know who's married, who was not, Miss Burgess. What I remember about Mrs. Burgess was she had a mimeograph machine. There were no copy machines back then. There were no no Xeroxes, no nothing. Well, maybe something somewhere, but not in schools. If you had to make copies, which you did, for any number of things to hand out to students, you made them with a mimeograph machine. And I still remember to this day, and she had purple ink all over her hands. And I remember thinking, oh my God, and then the smell of the mimeograph machine, the ink smelled. And this was the way you made copies. We also had audiovisual. They had movie projectors, 16 millimeter movie projectors. And every once in a while, from somewhere, I don't remember, we got films. I remember we were all happy because that means we didn't have class for that class time, and we got to see a movie. Well, my dad, for a while back then, worked for Esquire magazine. And he was able to get 16 millimeter movies. And I would make arrangements with a school here and bring the films in. And I was pretty popular because that meant one less class, you know. And we also, I remember one in particular, we showed it in the science room, which was on the second floor at the end of the hall.
How do you summarize 33 years of my life that has been spent with Scammon? So I was raised in this neighborhood just about 2 blocks away on Keystone Avenue and School Street. And I would walk to school every day. My real story with Scammon started in September of 1982 when I started as a kindergartner in room 107. I started school at a time in the Chicago public schools where the CPS was ordered to integrate the schools, predominantly white schools, and as a result, Scammon went through a busking program. My time at Scammon was marked by diversity and exposure to friends and teachers from all different cultures and all different neighborhoods throughout our city. I was taught and raised up by many teachers, some of which were still here when I first started teaching. Teachers like Miss McKinney and Miss Kay, Miss Holmeyer, Mr. Wozniak, Mr. James, people like Mrs. Anderson and Mr. Goldberg. I left Scammon in 1990. I came back as a teacher in the year 2000. I came back because I wanted to give back to the community that raised me. I was hired by Mr. Bushbacher, Mr. Goldberg, and Miss Thomas, who was a teacher here at Scammon as well, but she was an assistant principal at the time. You know, when I left Scammon, there were about 500 students that were part of the school. But by the time I came back 10 years later, the school had grown immensely, and there were about 1,200 students. The school was overcrowded. We had to build a new annex. When I thought about the type of teacher that I wanted to be, I thought about my former teacher, Mr. Wozniak, and I want to give him a big shout out. Mr. Wozniak, a beloved Scammon icon who cared for our neighborhood and loved our students and loved our families here in the community. He taught with passion, he taught with humor, and was loyal and dedicated to our school. I've had the joy of teaching thousands of students from the community, from the neighborhood. I even taught the kids of those students, so second generation, which is a blessing to me. One of the things I love about Scammon is the architecture of the building. Actually, the building has this particular look from typical schools of the 1920s. And you can see many of these schools and the type of architecture that they have all along the northwest side, as well as some parts of the west side and the southwest side. This was a great time for school building architecture. I believe the gentleman who designed Schurz High School, Dwight Perkins, was in charge of the architecture division of the Chicago Public Schools at the time. So you could see that definitely in the style and architecture of the building, and the wide halls, the wide staircases. You could also see that in the brick and the terracotta around the building. One of the things that I do love is when you walk in through the back, that's above the doors that say, "Be truthful, kind, and just, and then you shall fear no one," which is kind of a cool idea to put some sort of ethos, values of the community and the people of the time as children walked into the school.
What is your favorite memory here at Scammon?
Class of 2000, we were told to be very proud of that fact because we would be the only class of 2000 ever. Scammon turned out to be a place that it's a part of my life story I would never change. It's where I grew my command of the English language, had my academic successes recognized. In 8th grade, I was recognized as a salutatorian. Also a place where I met my best friend, whose name was Lucas Kościelski. He was a valedictorian. Hey, do you remember Miss Maeda and how strict she was? Hopefully she doesn't see this. Miss Rafanti and how she coached the math team and how much fun that was. There was a haunted house in the basement, and the homerooms were each invited and scheduled for a tour. It was really professionally done. We went to one space that had the lights off. All of a sudden, these strobe lights kicked in. And I saw my arm jerk movements. I think I almost had a panic attack. I think I came out of that like gasping for air a little bit. And
Hi, my name's Leo Reyna. I went to Scammon from 1997 to 2008, so I graduated from Scammon. I live in the area. I've lived in the area my entire life. Some of my earliest memories at Scammon were definitely pre-K in room 107. I was in the full day program with Miss Naboa, and we had that huge play area, the sand tables, the aquatic tables. My 4th grade class with Miss Emeka, it was in the mobiles in room 003, I believe. How much of a great teacher Miss Emeka was and how she challenged me to be the best version that I could be. Yeah, Scammon has gone through many changes. I think it still remains a staple in the community and somewhere where the students and community members feel comfortable. My 5th grade class, Mr. Wozniak, I believe he was in 203 or 205 at the time. An amazing experience in the classroom, of course, learning, but also, taking a step out of the classroom and just learning about life through Mr. Wozniak and his experiences and his amazing personality and his ability to relate to every student. It's just something that I still carry with me and I still think about.
My name is Leslie Perez. I'm pretty sure it's class of 2001. I can speak to the plaques above the gym. So Mr. Goldberg, that was the principal many years ago. And I can speak to the plaque above the auditorium. That is Mr. Bushbacher. He was the assistant principal. He was mainly known for disciplining. And Mr. Goldberg was the principal and very nice always. Some of my favorite memories, Mr. Wozniak, he was my 4th grade teacher. He loved telling us the lavatory joke, and that was his way of telling us it was time for the bathroom. I was the assistant principal's helper in 8th grade, so I was the one passing out all the Student of the Month awards. I would get all that ready for her, and then during the ceremony, she would pass that out to students.
Scammon Harris, class of 76, Scammon School. My favorite memories are my teachers, Ms. Thomas, Ms. McCarty, and making all the friends I made.
I'm Oswaldo Andrade. I graduated in the year of 2024. Probably all of 7th grade after school when I went to algebra. Mr. G always taught it in such a fun, memorable way. And I still remember a lot of his lessons to this day in high school where I'm taking Trig at Lane Tech.
Hi, my name is Natalie and I'm in class of 2024. My favorite memories at Scammon were playing sports.
Hi, my name is Adriana Corral. I was a student here at Scammon, class of 97. And the best thing that I can remember about the school were the teachers. Shout out to Mr. Wozniak.
So my name is Manuel Martinez, class of 2025, and my favorite memory of Scammon was in a basketball game I made my very first point. I was so happy.
My name is Jonathan Scammon, and I am class of 2024. My favorite memory from Scammon was when me and my friends came for Halloween as SpongeBob characters.
Hi, my name is Marisha Alisea. I'm class of 1994. My fondest memory is Mr. Wozniak and his math team. He used to have us go against each other, and it was really fun. I also remember Miss Anderson. She was always mad at me in social studies. Miss Thomas, she became a principal. And we had our first female gym teacher, Miss Rose.
My name is Fernando Mora. I'm a class of 2023. Favorite memories I used to have in Scammon was the friendships I made here.
My name is Talia Salgado, and I graduated class of 2009. My favorite memory from Scammon was all the teachers and how everything's been changing.
My favorite memory at Scammon was probably the Cubs hot dog sale where we got to watch the Cubs game in the lunchroom. Probably my first field trip, the first day that I came in 4th grade with Ms. Maldonado.
When I got into room 110,
in my 4th grade class after field day, we were just relaxing in the classroom.
We watched a movie with one of my favorite teachers. I was on a field trip with my 4th grade teacher.
When we have the book fair in the gym.
Then we went to the museum.
When I was in room 303. Doing arts and crafts in room 109.
When we went to a field trip in all my classes.
In room 105 when we were doing reading.
We learned math in room 108.
Doing math in 108 is when they first built the playground.
A leader in establishing free schools in Chicago, a lawyer and businessman, Jonathan Young Scammon was born on a farm in Whitefield, Maine, July 27, 1812. He was the son of Eliakim and Joanna Young Scammon. With a farmer's life in prospect, his future was suddenly changed by the loss of 2 fingers on his left hand. At the age of 18, he entered Waterville College, but left at the end of his first year due probably to lack of funds. He studied law in a law office and was admitted to the bar in 1835.
As soon as he was admitted to the bar in Kennebec County, he left his home for a tour of observation in several states. In the course of this journey, he reached Chicago in September of 1835.
He was one of the ambitious men who followed the Erie Canal to the Great Lakes and Chicago, a bustling town of 1,500.
Not being greatly impressed with the town, he was preparing to move on when the temporary job of deputy clerk in the circuit court was offered to him. He accepted, and Chicago became his home for the remaining 55 years of his life. He was admitted to the Illinois bar and rapidly won a place of prominence and leadership.
While practicing law, Scammon was an active member of the Whig Party and later the Republican Party.
Deeply interested in public education, he was responsible for the establishment of free schools in Chicago. For years, he was a member of the Board of Education and president from 1845 to 1848.
After supporting Abraham Lincoln's bid for the presidency, he was elected to the state senate in 1861, known for his conservative progress stance.
He never admitted to being active in the Underground Railroad, since after all, that would mean as a lawyer that he had broken the law. But he was often accused of it. When asked in court, he would refuse a summons to oppose under the fugitive state law. He said he'd obey the summons, but he would be sure to stub his toe and fall down on the way to join it.
Scammon was consistently and actively opposed to the institution of slavery and fought to prevent its spread to Illinois.
He was instrumental in founding many Chicago societies and charitable institutions, for most of which he served as president.
In 1844, he created the first newspaper, the Chicago Daily Journal. He founded the Chicago Historical Society in 1856, the Chicago Astronomical Society, the Chicago Academy of Science, a hospital, and the original University of Chicago.
His upholding for progress principles was matched by his appreciation of the arts and sciences, and he confounded numerous cultural organizations, including the Chicago Historical Society. Scammon died on March 17, 1890, and was interred in Oakwood Cemetery on Chicago's South Side.
Since then, 2 schools have been erected in his honor. The first was at Madison and Halsted Streets 1841 to 1887. Next, the name was given to the old Division High building at 107 South Morgan Street. This building was raised in 1959. The second school erected is at 4201 West Henderson Street. It is the third structure to have the Scammon name. It stands as a memorial to his greatness.
The chain of events leading to the development of Irving Park began in 1843 when Major Noble purchased a 160-acre tract from land from Christopher L. Ward, upon which Noble established a farm. The boundaries of that farm today would be Montrose to the north, Irving Park to the south, Pulaski to the east, and Costner to the west.
Organized education in Chicago goes back to its earliest days as a fort and pioneer settlement. In 1847, the board erected Scammon School at Madison and Union Streets, which was a 2-story, 50 feet by 72 feet brick building with a simple cornice and hip roof.
It was known simply as School Number 3. It was named after Jonathan Young Scammon, second president of the Chicago Board of Education between 1843 and 1845. The school was transferred to the old West Division High School building October 29, 1887, at the southeast corner of Monroe and Morgan Streets. It was closed in 1916, and in the early 1920s, Scammon School portables were a branch of Irving Park School. In June 1926, the present building was erected at 4201 West Henderson Street.
A century has passed and Scammon Elementary School still stands.
Chicago was founded as a city in 1837, and it's amazing to think how Jonathan Young Scammon arrived to the city 2 years just before that. Since then, the city of Chicago experienced events that shook the nation, such as the Civil War and the Great Chicago Fire. But revival and growth, such as the World's Columbian Exposition and the Century of Progress International Exposition, or the Chicago World's Fair. Scammon School was erected in 1926 on Henderson Street in Old Irving Park and still stands there today as a cornerstone of the community. Many have come and gone, passing through the hallways and classrooms, all having an impact in one way or another, all existing as a memory never forgotten, all contributing to the growth of this city in synergy and oneness. Though you may feel forgotten, meaningless, and small, remember that there's always someone who remembers you. Just as Scammon Elementary's vision statement states, we are a proud family of learners dedicated to improving ourselves and the world around us through hard work and kindness. Let us take pride in who we are. For
we are Huskies, we are a pack. We will work hard so we can do better today than we did yesterday. We treat others the way we want to be treated. We are respectful, we are responsible, we are ready to succeed. Go Huskies!
Happy 100th year, Scammon.
Happy 100th birthday. Happy 100th birthday.